Most cheapest cars in the world. From factory new sedans under $5,000 to tiny cars built for the world's toughest streets, these are the 50 cheapest rides you can actually buy. But before you think cheap means junk, let's start with a car that actually punches way above its price. At first glance, the Renault Kwid doesn't even look cheap. With chunky SUV styling, a digital dashboard, and touchscreen infotainment, you'd think it costs double what it does. In India and several markets, the Kwid starts at around $4,200 brand new. It offers a 0.8-liter or 1.0-liter engine, surprisingly roomy interiors for its size, and real-world fuel economy that feels more like a motorcycle than a car. Sure, it's built light, and you won't be winning any drag races, but if you want serious looks without a serious wallet punch, the Kwid delivers better than almost anything else at this price. And if you think an SUV-style car for $4,000 is crazy, wait till you see the next one. It's even cheaper and still comes with 4 doors. Nissan revived the Datsun brand just to build ultra-affordable cars for emerging markets, and the Geo is the headline act. For around $4,000 to $4,500, you get a full 5-door hatchback, a 1.2-liter engine, and basic but reliable engineering. It's no frills, manual windows, simple interiors, but that's the point. Datsun focused on durability and lightness, which is why the Go became a favorite among budget-conscious buyers from India to South Africa. And with real-world mileage over 20 km per liter, it's cheaper to own than some people's coffee habits. But if you think a 5-door hatchback for under $5,000 is shocking, the next car made headlines by being so cheap, people thought it was a scam. The Tata Nano wasn't just cheap, it was revolutionary. Launched in 2008 with a starting price of just $2,500, it was built to get Indian families off scooters and into safe, enclosed transportation. It had a tiny 0.6-liter engine, no power steering, no air conditioning on base models, and just about the simplest construction you can imagine. But it worked. The Nano could cruise at 60 miles per hour, sipped gas, and fit 4 adults in a pinch. Sure, it lacked modern safety standards, and eventually production ended in 2018. But the Nano proved one thing: a brand new car cheaper than most used ones was possible. And if you thought $2,500 was the limit for new cars, the next model proves you could actually go lower, if you were willing to think small. When Bajaj set out to make the Couté, they weren't trying to compete with traditional cars. They were trying to replace tuk-tuks and rickshaws with something safer. For around $2,000 to $3,000, the Bajaj Couté offers a fully enclosed 4-wheeler with a 216cc engine, seating for 4, and the kind of maneuverability that absolutely dominates narrow city streets. It's technically a quadricycle, not a car by international standards, meaning it's lighter, slower, top speed about 44 miles per hour, and optimized for urban survival. Cheap, ridiculously fuel efficient, and practically bulletproof in traffic. If your mission is to beat city congestion on a budget, the Couté is almost unbeatable. But if you thought squeezing 4 seats into a golf cart-sized frame was crazy, the next car proves you can still buy a real sedan for about the cost of a used laptop. The Maruti Suzuki Alto 800 isn't just affordable, it's the best-selling car in India for years. Starting at around $4,100, the Alto 800 delivers honest transportation, a tiny 0.8-liter engine, simple but durable interiors, and a reputation for reliability that rivals cars 3 times its price. It's designed for brutal city traffic, scorching temperatures, bad roads, you name it. Fuel economy? A jaw-dropping 22 to 24 km per liter. If you need something that simply works, sips gas, and survives years of abuse without a single complaint, the Alto 800 is one of the smartest ways to spend $4,000. And if you think India builds the best budget rides, wait till you see the next car, because China's answer to cheap cars came with modern tech and actual luxury touches. When the Chery QQ3 launched, it wasn't just cheap. It came loaded with features you wouldn't expect at this price. For around $3,800 to $4,500, you got power windows, air conditioning, a CD player, and even airbags depending on the market. Powered by a 0.8-liter or 1.1-liter engine, the QQ3 became insanely popular in China, South America, and Africa because it offered real creature comforts at motorcycle prices. It's tiny, it's basic under the skin, but it feels like a proper car, something you can actually live with without feeling like you bought a glorified lawnmower. But if you thought a fully loaded microcar was the end of the budget line, the next car proved you could still get brand new wheels even cheaper, if you're willing to go micro in every sense. The Changli Nameka might just be the cheapest car you can buy new. For around $1,200 to $1,500, depending on the model, you can literally order one online, including shipping from China, and have it arrive at your doorstep. Technically an electric vehicle classified closer to a golf cart, the Changli Nameka offers a roof, doors, headlights, a basic interior, and about 30 miles of range. Top speed? A blazing 25 miles per hour. But if you just need ultra-basic city transport, or you live in a quiet town where slow is fine, this thing is so cheap it makes bicycles jealous. But if you think an electric city pod sounds extreme, the next car showed the world you could have a real gasoline-powered hatchback for little more than pocket change. The Suzuki Celerio doesn't just aim to be cheap, it aims to be a real car at the lowest possible price. Starting around $4,500 to $5,000 in many markets, the Celerio comes with a 1.0-liter 3-cylinder engine, modern safety features like ABS, and enough room inside to feel like a class above its weight. It's known for having one of the most generous cargo spaces in its class too, despite its tiny footprint. The Celerio is proof you don't have to sacrifice dignity to buy affordably. It looks normal, drives predictably, and keeps your wallet safely intact. The Hyundai Eon was Hyundai's big play for the ultra-budget market, and it hit the mark perfectly. Priced around $4,500 to $5,000 when new in countries like India and the Philippines, the Eon packed surprisingly modern styling, a 0.8-liter engine, and respectable interiors that didn't scream cheap. It also handled rough city driving better than you'd expect, with excellent mileage figures, often 20 km per liter or more. Sure, it wasn't built for racing, but for dense urban commutes, tight parking, and daily survival. The Eon offered more car per dollar than almost anything else on the road. But if you think Hyundai stopped there, the next car shows how another Asian automaker managed to squeeze even more space, more seats, and more value into a rock-bottom price. The Perodua Axia, built by Malaysia's leading budget brand, is one of the best-kept secrets in cheap motoring. Starting at around $5,000 brand new, the Axia offers seating for 5, ultra-low running costs, and even modern touches like parking sensors and touchscreen infotainment on higher trims. It's powered by a tiny 1.0-liter engine, but pulls off the balancing act between city nimbleness and highway capability better than you'd expect from a car this affordable. And because it's backed by Toyota Daihatsu engineering under the skin, reliability is practically guaranteed. But if a reliable city hatch is still too mainstream for you, wait until you see the next car, a 3-wheeled rebel that changed budget transportation forever. You can't talk about cheap cars without mentioning the legendary Reliant Robin. Built in Britain starting in the 1970s, the Robin was a 3-wheeled car designed to dodge high vehicle taxes and deliver ultra-affordable ownership. With its fiberglass body, tiny 0.75 to 0.85-liter engines, and seating for 4, it somehow balanced practicality with comedy, because if you took corners too fast, it could literally tip over. Priced to undercut even basic economy cars of its time, the Robin is remembered fondly, and sometimes mockingly, as one of the most charming disasters on 3 wheels. But if you think 3 wheels are risky, the next car doubled down on small size but managed to stay upright, and even became a bestseller in its class. The Daewoo Matiz was one of the first truly global cheap cars, sold across Asia, Europe, and Latin America, starting in the late 90s. Starting at prices that often hovered around $4,000 to $5,000, the Matiz offered a tiny footprint, a zippy 0.8-liter engine, and styling penned by none other than Giorgetto Giugiaro, one of the world's greatest car designers. Despite its size, the Matiz could seat 4 adults tightly and offered basic comforts like air conditioning and power steering on higher trims. It wasn't just cheap, it was cheerful, and it helped spark a wave of small car innovation that stretched far beyond its Korean roots. But if you think the Matiz was the ultimate in cheap global cars, the next model turned even more heads by blending rock-bottom pricing with real European swagger. Few cars have matched the Fiat Panda when it comes to combining simplicity, affordability, and sheer toughness. Debuting in the early 1980s for prices as low as $3,500, the Panda offered boxy practicality, ultra-lightweight construction, and engines so basic you could practically fix them with a butter knife. It wasn't fast, it wasn't luxurious, but the Panda became beloved across Europe because it could survive anything: bad roads, harsh winters, rough driving, and keep ticking. It even spawned 4x4 versions that could outperform more expensive SUVs off-road. The Panda proved that when it comes to budget cars, being tough often matters more than being fancy. But if a rugged little European box isn't weird enough for you, wait till you meet the next car, a ride so tiny it could park sideways on a sidewalk without getting noticed. The Peel P50 isn't just cheap, it holds the record as the smallest production car in the world. Built in the 1960s on the Isle of Man, the P50 was just 54 inches long, 41 inches wide, and weighed about 130 pounds. Price when new? About 200 pounds. That's roughly $400 adjusted back then. It had a single door, one headlight, one windshield wiper, and no reverse gear. You physically pulled it backward by hand if needed. Despite looking like a joke, the Peel P50 was technically road legal and could reach about 38 miles per hour. It wasn't a car you drove for comfort. It was a car you drove because you loved being the center of attention. And if you thought tiny cars peaked with the Peel, the next car added 2 wheels, 2 doors, and a whole lot of weird to the mix. The Smart Fortwo took everything people knew about cars and shrunk it into something barely bigger than a couch. Debuting in the late 90s, early Smart models sold for around $5,000 to $6,000 in certain European markets, targeting urban drivers who needed extreme parking flexibility. With a tiny 0.6-liter engine, seating for 2, and a turning radius smaller than most golf carts, the Fortwo could fit in parking spots that normal cars wouldn't even attempt. It wasn't built for speed, or for carrying more than a couple of grocery bags. But if your biggest enemy was city congestion, the Smart Fortwo was your secret weapon. But if you thought Smart invented the small car formula, the next brand proved you could go even cheaper by slapping 4 wheels under what was basically a motorcycle. In India, the Tata Ace Zip filled a market no one else wanted to touch. Ultra-affordable, ultra-compact pickup trucks. Priced around $2,800 to $3,200 brand new, the Ace Zip offers a small diesel or petrol engine, a simple steel frame, and just enough cabin space to keep you dry during a monsoon. It's slow, top speed around 40 miles per hour, and it's basic, but it can haul a shocking amount of weight for something this tiny. Built mainly for farmers, street vendors, and small businesses, the Ace Zip proves you don't need a $60,000 truck to get real work done. You just need something that refuses to quit. But if you think tiny trucks are practical, the next car showed that cheap rides can also look way more luxurious than their price tag suggests. The Geely LC Panda from China might be one of the most charming budget cars ever made. Launched around $4,000 to $5,000, it featured headlights designed to look like panda eyes, a playful body shape, and real features like ABS brakes and airbags, stuff you'd normally never expect on a car this cheap. It wasn't fast, but it wasn't supposed to be. It was affordable city transportation with personality, and it turned Geely into a major player internationally. Plus, it had a 5-star crash safety rating in China, making it one of the safest budget options in its class when it debuted. And if you thought safety and style don't mix at low prices, the next car flipped the whole cheap car game on its head by offering electric power at a dirt cheap price. Most people expect the cheapest cars to be forgotten in dusty markets, not the Wuling Hongguang Mini EV. Starting around $4,500, this tiny electric city car didn't just make headlines in China, it outsold the Tesla Model 3 for months. With about 100 miles of range, a backseat big enough for kids, and real-world practicality baked into every corner, the Hongguang Mini EV became a phenomenon. It wasn't about luxury or performance, it was about giving millions of people their very first electric car. No drama, no pretense, just affordable freedom. But while the Mini EV became a symbol of smart, simple EV life, the next car shows what happens when you push cheap so far it stops making sense. The Mahindra E20 was supposed to be India's great leap into affordable electric vehicles. For around $6,000, you got a tiny plastic-bodied hatchback with a modest battery and about 75 miles of range. On paper, it sounded perfect, but in reality, the E20 struggled with rough roads, looked like a rejected golf cart design, and took forever to recharge. Still, you have to give Mahindra credit. Before Tesla's flooded headlines, they were already trying to democratize electric cars for the world's roughest streets. But while the E20 struggled to find its place, the next car became a cultural icon, proof that sometimes a cheap car can define a generation. The original Volkswagen Beetle wasn't just cheap, it was revolutionary. Designed to be affordable for working families in Germany during the 1930s, early Beetles sold for the equivalent of $3,000 to $4,000 today. It wasn't fast, it wasn't flashy, but it was almost impossible to kill. Simple air-cooled engines, rugged steel frames, and maintenance you could do yourself with a pocket knife made the Beetle a global symbol of cheap, practical freedom. And here's the crazy part. Over 21 million Beetles were built, making it one of the best-selling vehicles in history. But if you thought the Beetle was basic, the next car made basic look like luxury, because it was built like a soapbox derby racer for actual adults. In most countries, car models evolve every few years. But the Suzuki Meyran in Pakistan stayed practically the same for over 3 decades. First introduced in the late 1980s, the Meyran was based on the ancient Suzuki Alto platform, yet kept selling year after year because it was so cheap and so simple to fix. At prices around $4,000 to $5,000, you got manual everything: windows, locks, steering, and a 0.8-liter engine that could survive apocalyptic road conditions. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't fast, but in terms of pure mechanical survival, few cars can match the Meyran's gritty reputation. But if sticking to the past worked for Suzuki, the next brand thought the future was selling luxury looks on a ramen noodle budget. If you haven't heard of the Chang'an Benben Mini, you're not alone. Sold mainly in China and select Asian markets for around $3,800, the Benben Mini looks suspiciously like a shrunken Ford Fiesta, but costs less than a good smartphone. You get a 1.0-liter engine, front-wheel drive, actual air conditioning, and even a semi-modern dashboard, depending on the trim. It's not a performance car, it's not even fast. But if you need new wheels that don't scream compromise from across the parking lot, the Benben Mini is an absurdly good deal. But if you thought affordable cars had to be boring, the next one proved cheap rides could still bring serious weirdness and a whole lot of unexpected fame. The Yugo didn't just sell itself on price, it sold itself on pure reckless optimism. Marketed heavily in the United States in the 1980s, brand new Yugos hit American showrooms for just $3,990. The pitch? A European-built car for less than half the price of anything else. The reality? Well, questionable reliability, ancient technology, and enough mechanical quirks to make an entire generation of mechanics tear their hair out. Still, for a brief moment, the Yugo captured the dream of car ownership for people who thought they could never afford it. And that's a kind of success money can't always buy. But if you thought the Yugo was chaotic, wait until you meet the next car, a ride so strange it became a legend for all the wrong reasons. The Espresso wants you to think SUV, not hatchback. And weirdly, it kind of works. Launched at $5,300, it's tall, boxy, and proudly rugged looking for its tiny size. Underneath, it's powered by a 1.0-liter 3-cylinder engine that's easy to fix, cheap to run, and surprisingly peppy in city traffic. It's no real off-roader, but in traffic jams, pothole-ridden streets, and tiny parking spaces, the Espresso punches above its weight. But if you think mini SUVs are the only way to flex on a budget, the next car took a totally different route. Maximum cuteness, minimal dollars. The Baojun E100 was GM and SAIC's answer to China's exploding demand for cheap EVs. Sold new for $5,000 flat, the E100 is a 2-seater electric car perfect for city driving. With a top speed of 62 miles per hour and a range of 96 miles, it wasn't built to dominate highways. But in congested cities, it offered a smooth, silent, and affordable alternative to gas guzzlers. Also, parking one feels like parking a shopping cart, easy in the tightest spots. But if you thought EVs were only practical, the next car went retro, bringing cheap motoring back to basics in a way that would make 1960s car designers jealous. The Dacia Logan wasn't just cheap, it was revolutionary for Eastern Europe. Launched brand new for $6,000, it gave working families something they rarely had access to before, a full sedan. Built ruggedly with Renault technology underneath, the Logan could take endless abuse, carry 5 adults and luggage, and do it all while sipping gas. Today, Dacia is known for value, but it all started here, with a sedan that felt twice its price. But if you think Romania nailed cheap sedans, the next brand made sure you could get a real, honest-to-goodness pickup truck for less than the cost of a Rolex. Farmers, traders, and business owners across India swear by the Mahindra Bolero pickup, and for good reason. With a starting price of $5,800, it's a heavy-duty machine disguised as an entry-level truck. You get a strong diesel engine, simple rear-wheel drive architecture, and the kind of build quality that lets it haul loads across deserts, jungles, and pothole hellscapes. Forget luxury, forget comfort. The Bolero is about surviving absolutely anything. But if utility is king, the next car proved that even luxury brands sometimes take a stab at building a budget hero. And weirdly, it worked. The Skoda Citigo is what happens when Volkswagen quietly builds a tiny car for budget buyers, but hides it under a cheaper brand. Priced from $6,500, the Citigo offers real German engineering, surprising ride comfort, and a no-nonsense cabin that feels tough enough for daily abuse. It's small enough to thrive in dense European cities, but still mature enough to handle open roads without feeling like a toy. But if Europe made cheap feel normal, the next car threw normal out the window and went fully weird, in a way that somehow made perfect sense. The Bajaj RE60 was never meant to be glamorous. It was meant to be cheaper and safer than a rickshaw. Sold for an almost unbelievable $2,200, it's officially classified as a quadricycle rather than a car. It's tiny, underpowered, and slow, but it's covered, it's stable, and it's built to survive brutal city traffic with minimal fuss. If you ever wanted to own a brand new vehicle for less than the cost of a premium laptop, this is it. But if you think that's where the floor stops, wait until you meet a car that basically made being ridiculously affordable into its full identity. China's Changhai Freedom M50 shows how far $5,700 can go if you just think small. It's a 7-seater minivan. Yes, 7 seats, for less than what most people spend on used cars. Tiny 1.2-liter engine? Check. Folding rear seats? Check. Enough cargo room for a small business? Absolutely. It's not pretty, it's not fast, but if you need to move people or stuff cheaply, there's almost nothing better at this price. But if cheap minivans are useful, the next budget car is pure attitude. Small, stylish, and sneaky enough to make you forget it's built to a price. The original Renault Twingo, launched in the 1990s, was a pure shot of fun at a $6,000 price tag. It looked like a toy, it drove like a go-kart, and it dared to be different when most cheap cars were boring boxes. Simple interiors, tons of space thanks to its monobox shape, and playful personality made it a favorite for students, young drivers, and city dwellers everywhere. But if fun-sized cars are cool, The next ride made cheap cars stylish, like magazine cover stylish. The Fiat Palio was Fiat's global car project for emerging markets, and it delivered real style for just $6,200. Built tough to handle bad roads, packed with sharp European design, and offering a genuinely fun driving experience, the Palio showed that cheap didn't have to mean boring. In Brazil, India, and beyond, it became the go-to affordable hatch with just enough Italian spirit baked in. But while Fiat gave budget buyers some flair, the next car took simple and solid to a whole different level and built an empire doing it. The first-generation Chevrolet Spark, sold under the Daewoo badge first and later globally, became an unstoppable cheap car icon. Starting at $6,300, the Spark didn't offer much in terms of raw speed or thrills. What it did offer was reliability, super low fuel bills, and a "what you see is what you get" honesty that millions of city drivers needed and trusted. But if you think honesty was its selling point, the next cheap car sold itself with pure weirdness and a surprising dose of engineering bravery. The Tata Tiago proved that Tata Motors learned a lot from the Nano's struggles. For $6,500, the Tiago offered a properly modern hatchback, sharp styling, an airy cabin, real safety features, and the ability to handle highways without fear. In India and Latin America, the Tiago became the new face of affordable cars that didn't feel like cut-rate compromises anymore. But if Tata learned lessons over time, the next company went for broke, building one of the strangest, smallest, and somehow coolest cheap cars of all time. In Japan, the Suzuki Alto Lapin took cheap transportation and made it adorable. At $6,800 new, the Lapin was boxy, light, and unapologetically cute, with bunny logos everywhere inside and out. Designed mainly for young urban drivers, it proved that even on a tight budget, you could drive something stylish, personality-packed, and totally unlike anything else on the road. But while Japan mastered cute, cheap cars, the next ride showed that sometimes keeping it brutally simple is the cheapest way to survive. Before Daewoo became Chevrolet's budget brand, they launched the Tico, a tiny hatch that sold for just $4,800 when new. It had a tiny 0.8-liter three-cylinder engine, manual everything, and interiors so basic they made modern economy cars look fancy. Yet it became a legend in places like Eastern Europe, South America, and Asia because it just kept going and going and going. If you needed something cheap, tiny, and basically indestructible in Malaysia, the Perodua Viva was your first call. Launched brand new for $5,400, the Viva squeezed 5 doors, real air conditioning, and a bulletproof little 3-cylinder engine into a package barely bigger than a shoebox. Easy to park, easy to fix, easy to love. Viva was never about flash. It was about getting you from point A to B no matter what the city threw at you. But if you thought survival was the goal, the next car showed that you could dominate city traffic in something even smaller and somehow cooler. The Mitsubishi Minica looked like a child's toy blown up to full size, and that was the magic. For $5,900, you got a lightweight hatchback made for Japan's tight urban streets. Some versions even packed tiny turbocharged engines, turning the Minica into a hilarious little speed demon when you floored it. It wasn't about long trips. It was about blitzing through city traffic like a caffeinated ant. But if tiny turbos sound insane, the next cheap car became famous for something totally different: its ability to take abuse and never ever die. The Toyota Vitz, known elsewhere as the Yaris, didn't just offer value, it built an unkillable reputation. For $7,000 new in certain markets, you got a subcompact that could handle brutal roads, terrible fuel, and years of neglect without blinking. It wasn't fast, it wasn't sexy, but it was the car you bought if you wanted something you could pass on to your grandchildren still running. And if you think reliability ruled, the next car decided to mix cheapness with real luxury touches, proving you don't have to spend big to feel fancy. The Chery Tiggo 2 isn't just affordable, it's weirdly upscale for a budget SUV. Priced at $6,900, it offers faux leather interiors, touchscreen infotainment, decent ground clearance, and city-friendly SUV looks. Of course, it's still a basic car underneath, but in places like Brazil and the Middle East, it gives first-time buyers a chance to roll into an SUV life without paying SUV money. But if small SUVs are tempting, the next car took small to the next level by reinventing what a people mover could even look like. The Wuling Sunshine is one of the best-selling vehicles in China for one reason: it's unbelievably cheap and tough. Starting at just $5,000, it's a minivan stripped down to pure function, manual everything, hard plastic everywhere, and enough room to haul people, livestock, or cargo without flinching. No frills, no apologies, just reliable mechanical grit. And if mechanical grit is cool, the next car showed that sometimes the cheapest cars aren't made for the masses. They're made for pure rebellion. The Hindustan Ambassador, based on a 1950s British design, became India's national car for decades. New models, even into the 2000s, sold for $6,200, and the design barely changed since independence. Huge back seats, tough-as-nails construction, and an engine you could fix with a rock and some rope made the Ambi legendary. It wasn't just transportation, it was history rolling down the street. But if the Ambassador was history, the next car was the future. Just one that didn't work quite as planned. The Riva G-Wiz, sold mainly in the UK, was one of the first ultra-cheap electric cars, and boy, was it controversial. Priced around $6,800, it looked like a toy, topped out at 50 miles per hour, and crashed about as gracefully as a folding chair. Still, the G-Wiz proved one thing early: even EVs could go budget and find a cult following. But if risky EVs aren't your thing, the next car shows that cheap gas power still rules most of the world. The Suzuki Ciaz punches way above its price tag. Sold in markets like India and Southeast Asia for $7,000, it offers proper mid-size sedan space, decent luxury trims, and real highway cruising comfort. In a world of tiny budget cars, the Ciaz feels like a full step up for barely any more cash. But if budget sedans are impressive, the next car brings cheapness back to its wild, rebellious roots, one last time. The Citroën 2CV didn't just skip luxury, it made fun of it. Selling for around $6,400 adjusted in early models, the 2CV had hammock seats, a tiny two-cylinder engine, and suspension so soft you could cross plowed fields without spilling wine. It was meant to be as cheap, simple, and farmer-friendly as humanly possible, and somehow ended up beloved by city sophisticates too. And if ultimate simplicity is the dream, the next car showed what happens when you design a budget legend for the roughest streets on Earth. The Lada Riva, based on the old Fiat 124, became the Soviet Union's answer to cheap mass motoring. Built like a tank, easy to fix with basic tools, and priced at around $5,900, it was the car you bought if you wanted something that could survive winter, potholes, and bureaucratic hell. It's ugly, it's heavy, but it's still running in half the former USSR to this day. But if Lada built cars to survive, the next one aimed to make cheap cars beautiful, and somehow pulled it off. The Datsun 120Y, sold globally in the 1970s, brought stylish fastback lines, surprising reliability, and low running costs to the masses. All for around $6,200 brand new. Cheap to own, cheap to fix, and loved by enthusiasts today. The 120Y proved that budget cars didn't have to be boring appliances. They could have soul. But if retro cool isn't enough, the next car invented the modern small car template, and it did it before anyone else. The Honda N360 was tiny, cute, and revolutionary. Sold new for about $5,700, it was Japan's first mass-market city car. A 360 cubic centimeter, air-cooled miracle that showed Honda wasn't just about motorcycles. It was efficient, simple, and, most importantly, fun. Without the N360, there would be no Honda Civics, no Accords, no Empire. But if the N360 built an empire, the next car created a legacy so huge, it's still alive today. From the 1970s to today, the Suzuki Alto has been the gold standard of cheap, honest cars. Early Altos sold brand new for $5,800. They were ultra-light, ultra-efficient, easy to drive, and impossible to kill. And every new generation still sticks to that DNA. Simple car, cheap price, no drama. And now, after 49 rides through the cheapest cars on Earth, it's time for the ultimate survivor. The car that proved cheap doesn't have to mean compromise. If one car can claim to have changed a country, it's the Suzuki Maruti 800. Launched in India in the early 1980s for just $2,700, the Maruti 800 gave millions of middle-class families their first ever chance at owning a car. It was tiny, it was basic, but it was durable, cheap to run, and easy to fix. Within a decade, the Maruti 800 became not just transportation, it became hope on four wheels. And today, its legacy lives on in nearly every budget hatchback sold across Asia. And there you have it. 50 of the world's cheapest cars that proved price isn't everything. Hit subscribe if you're ready for more stories where speed, style, and survival all start way under $10,000.